Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another of the Discussion Sunday podcast. This week is gonna be a little bit shorter one. We're gonna keep it again more to what's been going on with discussion. So no special guest today, but we do have also a very special guest. He doesn't come on too often, and that's our lead developer, Asphyxia. Do you want to say hi real quick?
Hello.
There he is. So he is using a voice changer because he is very concerned about his privacy. So just keep that in mind. There's nothing sinister about his voice. That is just a voice changer he's using. He's a very nice person. I could vouch for him. I think Brian can also. Um,
Yep.
so yeah. Shall we just kind of give a little update on what we've been all doing this last week, starting with development, I guess.
Sure. So we've mainly been focusing on finishing our features for Discussions 2.5, and you're already slowly starting to see some of those features get rolled out. Over the course of the last few months, we've been seeing continuous UI UX changes to the website, new features introduced such as tag discovery, trending tags, so on. Currently, where our focus is we're working on something new called the Ambassador Program, which Jack can go into more detail about. But to give a brief overview of what it is it allows companies or organizations to create a post on Discussions and then create a campaign to promote that post across other platforms like Twitter or Reddit or Telegram, and for those promoters or those ambassadors to be rewarded for promoting it. And I think overall, it's a very useful system in terms of organizations being able to market their product to a wider audience.
Yeah. Go on, sorry.
Yeah, aside from that, we again have just been working on Discussions 2.5 features. We are getting closer and closer to finishing this full feature list. The full feature list is available on GitHub. One of the newest features that we recently added was the desktop notifications. This happened a while ago, so now notifications that you receive can be actually sent to you via desktop alert. There was actually a short period of time where the EOS provider defuse went down for a short bit, and it was kind of cool to actually be able to get a notification once everything kind of came back online. There's been also minor quality of life improvements in terms of how tipping works. Get a nice summary when you're making a tip. One of the biggest changes that we just introduced for Unified ID is the ability to connect social media to Unified ID. And that's one of the key parts of one of the requirements we needed in terms of the ambassador program. So we're continuing to see Unified ID grow in terms of its flexibility and what it'll be capable of doing in the future.
Yeah, so you cover a lot of stuff there, and I just want to touch on the ambassador program a little bit. If you're a listener that's listened to our past podcast, you know that the ambassador program is a way to kind of again, to easily allow companies to onboard users. We're working in conjunction with that. The next feature we're gonna roll out is to redeem the tokens you have earned through various interactions on the website for actual EOS account. So right now, the scope of discussion is not to be, kind of it's kind of be like the bridge onto EOS and onto other blockchains in the future. So EOS, obviously being the main chain that we're operating on, it's very difficult to get a EOS account. So I think having this ambassador program, having a tipping system, and many other things that we're gonna do in the future is really gonna make that transition seamless into this blockchain ecosystem that's developing quite vibrantly. But just people like the average person, that barrier is just so high in terms of the user interface and user interaction. Which is something that we focus really a lot of our energy into lowering, so that now if you go on Discussions, you can sign up for an account and start interacting with the DApp in a matter of minutes, right? So we gotta continue pushing that and lower that user experience and helping that onboarding process into this amazing world that's the blockchain and all the blockchain applications on it. So, excuse me. Other than that, Brian, do you have anything to update us?
From a financial perspective, we're still applying to new exchanges.
Yeah.
We've been doing this continuously throughout like the last year and a half. The only issue is trying to find a suitable exchange that meets all our requirements and isn't too expensive.
Yeah. So we have so in the back we kind of review a few different exchange applications, and being a relatively small project, the prices they ask are not always not suitable, I would say. And then there's also the fact that I think listing on exchange without kind of knowing what kind of audience that exchange have is quite difficult. So, for example, let's say we list on an exchange that's really big in China, but right now we don't have like kind of a Chinese community or like a Chinese community manager or even a Chinese site or a Chinese. We do have a Chinese white paper actually.
Mhm.
So we might get that initial boost from getting listed, but afterwards, if we aren't able to communicate with our stakeholders, our new token holders that we gain from that exchange, I think it kind of loses its value quite a bit. So not only are we looking to list on more exchanges, we're looking into what kind of communities those exchanges have and which exchanges communities are most suited for us to kind of be listed on. And we are working on some other ways that would make getting Atmos tokens quite a bit easier. That the details of that will come at the end of 2.5, which should be very, very soon because we are wrapping up 2.5 quite well, actually. We're on schedule, if not ahead.
Very nice.
Yeah. So I think that's everything internally, actually. I guess there wasn't too much to update.
I think the majority of the updates was through like the development side.
Yeah. So there's a lot of cool stuff we're thinking and working on, but we don't want to. Maybe this is kind of we're a bit more a little too conservative, but we do have a lot of very, very exciting features we want to roll out. And if you're someone who's been following the site, we deliver, right, in terms of UI, in terms of the backend, the unified ID system. We deliver on these things, even though we might not always make the biggest deal out of it, which is something that we should probably do a bit more. We should kind of, what's the word?
Hype the community up a little bit.
Yeah, what's it called when you kind of like hype yourself up? Like, yeah, I don't know. There's like a phrase for it. Kind of, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. But do you guys want to talk a bit about kind of what's been going on in the EOS community as well? Because there's quite a bit of few interesting stories that took place this week.
Sure.
Yeah, so the biggest thing recently in terms of the EOS community is that Brendan Bloomer, the CEO of block.one, kind of, I wouldn't say get in trouble, but he was having a bit of a back and forth with a pretty renowned community member, Red Kid. He's very active on Twitter. He is he defends he defends EOS very eloquently all the time. But I think there is this sense of frustration within the EOS community where they aren't seeing block.one participate as much as they like. So Red Kid put out a tweet asking whether or not it makes sense for block.one to be buying up Bitcoin in this market instead of investing into EOS projects and whatnot. And Brendan Boomer kind of took that the wrong way, I think, and blocked him on Twitter. And I think that action, I don't want to say this is correct or not. Obviously, Twitter has a feature that allows you to block users. That's his right to use it. But one of the things that really got us started, and kind of one of the reasons why Asphyxia created Discussions and its delegated moderation system is so that we could hold these projects accountable. And Twitter is the communication channel of choice for block.one. That's perfectly okay. But as token holders, I do feel like the what's the word? The pushback from the community was quite justified when you just go and block a user. I'm not sure if I would call it censorship, because again, you can still say whatever you want on Twitter. He's blocked a very prominent community member that was making, in my opinion, quite substantial criticisms of block.one. So, but I guess you guys haven't been following that. Maybe I'm spending too much time on Twitter.
I've seen the post, but it just feels like Brendan Bloomer was being a little petty, blocking somebody. Like, if they don't consider their opinion like a good opinion, they can just, ignore it. I don't see the point of it just blocking it.
Yeah.
Like, he brought out some very valid, opinions too, that I'm sure a lot of the EOS community also shares.
Yeah. And I mean, the Everything EOS, kind of the biggest podcast, other than Alpha Discussions, obviously, in the space. They kind of came out with a tweet with a poll asking whether or not EOS VC is misleading, because EOS VC has been investing in a lot of projects, and I mentioned this before as well. They have been investing in a lot of projects that doesn't necessarily tie back into EOS exactly. They invest in gaming teams, they invest in gaming studios, various different stuff, but none of the projects are. If you're someone who's interacted with the block users and the EOS community, every single time they make an announcement on the investment they made, is always like, well, that's cool, but we don't know anything about that company. While all these great projects on EOS are not getting funding, like Scatter being the best example. Scatter's had a long history of, trouble with their finances, but they are an integral part of the ecosystem. Without Scatter, I'm not sure how many people are able to actually use the apps and whatnot on EOS.
So this is one of the biggest issues that happened with Ethereum very early on, was that Charles Hoskins, one of the founders of Ethereum, wanted the Ethereum Foundation to be for-profit, and the majority of the members of the Ethereum Foundation, Vitalik included, wanted to be not-for-profit. And so we have to basically address, is EOS VC not for profit or is it for profit? And as far as I'm aware, they are a for-profit organization. And so because of that, they have absolutely no incentive at a monetary level anyways to invest in public infrastructure, regardless of how necessary we see all of that public infrastructure to be. And personally, I think that's kind of a shitty thing, because it's for example, if Scatter wasn't a thing, how many of us would be using EOS right now? Right? There's the majority, like you pointed out, the majority of the ecosystem is built around Scatter. You have a lot of the projects that they've invested in. I was looking at a list, almost half of them are, okay, actually maybe a third of them are these games or game companies that nobody has heard of before. And it feels kind of arbitrarily random to throw money at a game company, regardless of the fact that they're VC or not. So it just seems kind of arbitrary, because it's anyone can kind of make these promises on, oh, we're going to deliver a game on the blockchain. It's going to be great, and everyone's going to buy it, so and so. It just seems fairly arbitrary how they're kind of giving this money out. Now, not to say the least, one of the most interesting things is EOS VC has given money to Everpedia. They're listed on the EOS VC website, so they're not against giving money to token projects. Is the key thing to take away from that, is they're willing to fund those type of projects. I don't know if it was ever made clear what the agreement was between Everpedia and EOS VC. I'd be really interested in finding that out. There's a ton of other investments, as you pointed out, that kind of just nobody in EOS really knows what any of these things are, or understands how they're being built on EOS, or how it even benefits them as an EOS holder. So yeah, it does seem like there's been pretty poor communication in regards to what EOS VC is, how EOS VC is being used, and what its overall goals are.
Yeah, I agree. I do want to say that the incentive thing, they're holding something like 9% of EOS, so I guess that's the only incentive they have at the moment. And the thing about you mentioned that they don't have an incentive to invest in public infrastructure, something like Scatter. So I'm not saying that I agree or disagree with that. I just find it very interesting why Brendan Bloomer, when the worker proposal system was announced, and EOS Nation was leading the effort to do that, he kind of came out against it. It's well, this is not something we wanted to do ourselves. It's something that we see as a way to fund public infrastructure, and because Block One isn't doing it. So I don't know. That's like, I think you're right. Communication from Block One has been sparse, to say at the very best, and non-existent at the very worst. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think the
think there's
community is a little bit frustrated with them.
I think there is a big disconnect between Block One and the EOS community, and I would borderline say that it does feel like the EOS community feels more like a liability to Block One than an asset, to say the least.
I mean, it is an asset when they start hiring everybody, from the block producers team and the developers.
I think in terms of like the EOS IO developers that the EOS community produces, those can be assets to blockchain or to Block One. But I'm saying like the overall community, the token holders, they feel like it's or at least it seems like they're liabilities, and they don't particularly feel like they owe anything to token holders, whether that's due to like regulatory constraints or that is like genuine sentiment.
Yeah.
So I do think that there's really poor communication there, and I don't really see anything significantly improving in that regards. Maybe it would be worth like a future podcast, maybe reaching out to one of the guys at Scatter and getting kind of their side of this story, because honestly, like you said, they are one of the most deserving projects of the VC funding for public infrastructure on EOS, and they kind of never got it.
Yeah, I think a lot of the current projects are all logging in with Scatter, or at least they would have some compatibility with Scatter.
I mean, Scatter doesn't only produce the wallet; it produces the standard. It keeps up the standard. So even if you're using a different wallet, chances are you're using that Scatter signing protocol. So they're a big deal. Like without them, again, 90% of the projects just you can't interact with them. So, yeah, I have something else I wanted to say, but I forgot. But right, so Block One is gonna start voting at the end of May, end of this month, and obviously, the EOS New York team joined Block One to head their governance side of things. So EOS New York is a team that we have interacted with. I think we can say for the team that we think they're a really capable team. They're great at communication. Kevin's a great communicator. But the funny thing is, after they joined Block One, that communication seemed to have died down. So I don't know what the deal is. And I mentioned this privately before. Defuse went open source with their technology, and they announced that they're working closely with Block One to integrate their technology into the EOS blockchain or into the ecosystem. And just recently, we've been having a lot of problem with Defuse. So I'm not sure. That's because they're getting used a lot more, and they're kind of struggling to maintain the scalability of it. But it does seem like when Block One touches something, things don't go as well. So
yeah, I think originally they were supposed to hire them and work together, but then it turned into like an acquisition of sorts. I'm not quite sure on the exact details. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it's so like I think Block One. The rumors are Block One basically acquired Defuse by hiring the whole team and at a good price.
Oh, okay. I see. I just want to let you guys
So
know.
most of the decision making, I believe, is like through Block One now, and not so much through like the original Defuse team.
I see. Oh boy. We gotta get a lot of hate from this for this podcast. I just want to let you guys know because yeah, I think if you're one of those people listening at the moment who love EOS, it's okay. We're building on top of it. We devoted a lot of energy and resource into it. But I do think that there is time for constructive criticism. It's not like we just saying we're not calling Block One a scam. We're not calling EOS scam. We are a big stakeholder in this ecosystem because again, we're devoting money and energy and resources into building our project on top of this protocol, on top of this technology, because we think there's a future for it.
I'm just waiting to see like Block One do something that feels useful to token holders, and I think that's kind of what everyone's waiting for, because it feels like block.one has done like basically two things up until this point, which is one, they invest in like company like well EOS VC anyways invests in companies that nobody's heard of and nobody understands how they're benefiting EOS token holders.
Yeah.
And two, they end up competing, generally speaking, rather than supporting public infrastructure. And really, the only like public, I mean, like we can say that that might be starting to change with the whole Diffuse thing, because before Diffuse was proprietary software, and after block.one, acquired kind of like the rights to that or like took it over essentially. Diffuse is now open source software, so we can say that that's moving in the right direction. I really hope it continues to work, go that way. Because prior to that, we would see continuously community projects to fill certain caveats in the EOS project. For example, Chintai's token leasing platform was outcompeted by block.one's Rex.
Yeah.
You had block.one released UAL, which was the universal login system or something like that, and it never really caught on as much as EOS Transit did. Which EOS Transit was basically they both filled the same thing, which was like it was a bridge for multi-wallets support in terms of dApps. I believe most dApps are using Transit, not UAL. So block.one continues to compete with the public, and I think one of the things, it's like one of the most obvious areas that I think that they should be competing with. It's like they're not, which is like. We are still lacking a true, fully decentralized exchange on, EOS, and that could have been something block.one, could have developed by now. When they launched the project, there was at least some prototype code for a decentralized exchange, in the source code, and it's not like Dan doesn't have experience with decentralized exchanges having, come from BitShares. So, yeah. I think that's really the big frustration of everyone in EOS is we just want to see block.one do something useful for token holders so we can kind of understand what they've been doing this whole time. Like you said, I don't think they're like a scam or anything like that, but their actions are very confusing to say the least.
So I guess most of that can be solved with just like improved communication with token holders.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know what kind of legal restriction they're under, but I do feel like, come on, they're on Twitter, they're talking to people, they just don't ever share they don't share the reasoning behind the investments. They always, it's kind of like standards. Oh, it will leverage EOS IO technology. Like, okay, sure, but are they going to be developing something that is going to be beneficial for everybody, or just kind of kind of build on top of EOS and kind of tap into the market like everyone else that's doing it?
All right, I have $100,000 pitch. I'm going to create Minesweeper on the blockchain, and the high score will be kept on EOS blockchain. Hook me up, EOS VC.
Wait, what? Sorry?
Minesweeper, competitive Minesweeper on the blockchain.
Are you gonna ask block.one for funding for that?
I should.
Yeah, right. They seem to be.
They love watching games. They love watching games.
So yeah, yeah. I think the community is frustrated. Well, just an update to the whole fiasco with blocking, RecKit. But Bloomer have since then unblocked RecKit, and this is kind of due to the collective pressure, pushback from the community. I think a good part of it. And interestingly, on Telegram, Kevin, which now of course works for block.one, which and is also admin of the EOS Telegram, offered RecKit to be admin of the Telegram. So I'm like, okay.
I honestly don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing that he like unblocked them.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Like, I mean, if you're gonna go through with something like that, you just
stick to it.
Just go with it. Don't be wishy-washy and go back just because some people are complaining about it. Like, pick a direction, stick with it.
Hey Jack, have you ever interviewed any of the people from Everpedia?
We did have an AMA with the.
I remember that very early on.
Yeah, that was like 1.0, and kind of like the first few. I don't know. It was really early on, but yeah, I've been trying to land an interview with Sam. He hasn't gotten back to my emails. So
yeah, I
Sam,
think if you ever talk with them again, one of the biggest questions I think the whole community would be very interested in hearing is what kind of agreement do they have with block.one in regards to EOS VC? Because I think they're the only like investment EOS VC has made that actually interacts with the EOS community. So to kind of like to get their perspective on what kind of deal did they make with EOS VC would kind of give us insight as to what's going on with these 12 other or however many companies are also getting funding from EOS VC.
I don't think they'd be very happy to share, but we could try for sure. Hello,
Yeah.
Paul.
What's going on, guys?
Just shit talking block.one.
Good. Yeah, they deserve it. To go into the EOS main EOS Telegram and you mention anything negative about block.one, people get very upset who run that place.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And then you say like, yeah, but like some of the like most community grassroots projects, which all it needed was like minimal amounts of money from block.one and couldn't even get any attention from block.one. Like, Scatter, for example. And then they go, well, if they had a
we were just talking
good
about that
business model, they wouldn't need any money. Like, but that's kind of the whole point of VC funding. So you can kind of knew. But it's
I linked
a
you a
cult over there
video.
for sure.
I linked you a video, Paul, in the upper discussion channel that I think is relevant to your background. You can check it out later.
Yeah, for Paul, right?
Yeah, it's an AI for canceling out background noise.
It works really well. Like I saw I mean, I don't have any kind of graphics card that works with it, but like from the video, it's like it was some guy was banging on drums and had a fan blowing, and it's like you could hear him perfectly fine.
All right, so what's our next discussions topic, Jack?
I mean, there's some other stuff. So voice might or might not be launching globally this summer. It's like again, block.one, how concrete the communication is. I actually find it kind of ridiculous that voice is kind of like a black box. Paul, can you mute yourself just for a bit?
Yeah, it might cause you issues.
Yeah, it's quite a bit of noise. Yeah, so block.one voice is kind of ridiculous because it's like a black box. Because if you don't have an account, you can't see anything on it. So people have been like posting screenshots of what they're saying in there, and voice might not come out this summer. Who knows? Right. Other news, Vigor just has their first anniversary, so congratulations.
I would like to hear what block.one's expectations are for voice launching, and for what they envision year one of voice being globally launched looks like, or at least publicly launched, what it looks like. I'd be very curious to hear their expectations.
In terms of number of users and adoption
Just
wise?
overall, yeah, what they expect in terms of the platform usage and users, and even let's say how it'll tie in with EOS, just their overall forward-looking perspective for about a year. Be very interested to hear that.
I don't think you're gonna get to hear it.
I don't think so either. It would be interesting to hear it.
The best explanation I heard, and this is from someone who's not from block.one actually, is that they're building a blueprint for highly scalable applications. So I'm not sure if they're gonna open source their code for voice, which is another kind of interesting part. So if they're not open sourcing their code for this voice application, how would they provide that blueprint, right? So I don't know. It's just yeah. But I do think it's interesting. Again, we're not anti-voice. We just take a very different approach. For us, we kind of like to keep our government ID to ourselves, and we just think it's a huge barrier. But I do see the value of voice. Obviously, if you could get someone to KYC, KYC ready, you could do a lot more interesting stuff with different tokens, maybe even security tokens. Because again, you already have that huge first barrier. You already went over that. So I don't know. I wish voice does well. Obviously, we're on EOS, so if voice succeeds, we succeed. We can have more users that have EOS account that can interact with all different interesting things that we're doing. So yeah. So should I read some more headlines?
So just a quick question, with the EOS voice beta, You don't actually need an EOS account to use voice currently, right?
You do, I think, and they're running it on their own private blockchain.
Okay, I see.
Yeah. So they're doing everything, like they have an EOS account, I'm assuming. Like recording metadata on their private chain. But yeah, it's all just, they're doing everything on
Right, so
their
it's very similar then to like Warbly, where like you have this like foundation federation that like decides how resources are allocated on the chain, as opposed to
own.
like users owning resources.
I wouldn't know. The details
Okay,
are very,
okay.
very, very skim.
Yeah, okay, no problem.
Yeah. So that's voice. So that's just, one small screenshot of their new CEO, Zalatimo, saying that summer. That was literally the news story. Um, and someone asked him when global launch, and he say this summer, and that's the news. We get for voice. Again, Vigor has first year, so congratulations to the Vigor protocol DAC team. They are going to launch on mainnet officially in the coming months. I will have an interview with Andrew Bryan from Vigor to talk about all the interesting financial wizardry they're doing that I don't understand most of. Sounds like an interesting project. Brian's got a very strong history in traditional finance, so it would be very interesting to see what they're doing. I think what they like, again, this is my interpretation of it. So you guys know about Libra, right? The semi-stable coin that Facebook is trying to do.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, so I think they're trying to do something similar where they're gonna have various different EOS tokens, maybe other ones in the future. So they have just kind of a basket of tokens, and they have one token representing that portfolio, if you will, and that's meant to be adjusted based on the volatility of each token so that it is stable. I don't think they're calling themselves a stable coin, so it actually might not be pegged to the US dollar.
Are we
So
talking about Libra?
no, I'm talking about what Vigor is doing and how
Oh,
that.
okay, okay.
Yeah. So Vigor is kind of like that, but with EOS tokens instead of different national currencies and on EOS, decentralized. So yeah, but gonna learn more once I sit down with Andrew and ask him all that interesting question. Predict IQ just launched a second beta prediction market. I poked around a little bit. There's a video out there released. I think it's very cool. I think it's a missed opportunity that they don't allow for interaction with other smart contracts. Right now, you can only use their own oracle to kind of resolve the markets that you create on there. Again, like I mentioned in the video, I think it'd be very cool if like Pix EOS have this bidding system on the artwork. If you could put that as the oracle, you could kind of have a secondary market on top of the bidding market where you could guess like, oh, will this piece of art be worth more or less than 10,000 Pix EOS, and just have that smart contract resolve it automatically. I think that's like, I don't know, maybe I'm a simple money person, but I think that's like a very interesting use case. So yeah, price predictions, all kind of good stuff.
Yeah, I think it's great to see uh let's see, prediction markets come to EOS. I've always thought it's a really interesting use case and space of decentralization, kind of crowdsourced knowledge. What do you think the user experience of prediction markets can be a lot better on EOS than it's been on Augur, on Ethereum? I think the two biggest things that have kind of held Augur back is how easy it is to get set up and kind of going in terms of being able to participate in these markets. And again, as well, the fees that you pay for participating in the markets as a result of just creating transactions on the Ethereum blockchain.
Mm-hmm. And no one's using Augur at the moment, so technically speaking, every PDEOS Predict IQ is beating them hand over fist. Next piece of headline: Zoom buys Keybase. So we got a lot of flag from one of our community members who was using Zoom, and Zoom is stepping up the security by buying another company. I'm not sure how well this gonna work for them, but yeah, what do you guys think? Do you feel more secure using Zoom now that they bought Keybase?
Not necessarily, at least not yet.
All right.
I'm sure they'll improve everything in the upcoming months
Yeah.
because they got a huge influx of new users and new like business accounts due to COVID.
I think they must pay quite a pretty penny because I don't know. I think Keybase is a company with a culture that is really hard to buy. It seems that way, at least from from the outside. So for them to actually sell the company, I think it's quite a pretty penny.
Yeah, I think it all depends on how Zoom is going to like implement Keybases.
I think the
go ahead.
product will improve. As for what in regards to it will improve, I think is up for debate. I mean, it always goes to stand that if you have public infrastructure, and I saw this used as an example recently on Ethereum, if you have basically public infrastructure like Ethereum or like GitHub, and eventually when it gets big enough, the public infrastructure is sold off to a private company, i.e. Microsoft here, and then it becomes a matter of like, well, how are they going to monetize this platform? And typically with like these platforms, if you're not paying for it, you are the product, right? Your information and so on is the product. So, we'll have to see how they handle that going forward with Zoom. To say the least, with the way many companies have handled monetizing that sort of thing, I'm not overly optimistic.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I feel like blockchain tokenization was in the beginning. A lot of people was saying like that's kind of the answer to that, where you just have a vibrant kind of economic system with token. Therefore, you won't have to monetize user data. We haven't really seen that pan out, I would say. So, who knows? Maybe they do ICO after. Who knows what they'll be up to? Speaking of ICOs, Telegram's ICO comes to a disappointing end. Well, technically, it's not ending. So Telegram has been getting into a lot of hot water from the SEC for the token sale. So what they did now is they're telling token investors, okay, if you want a refund, we will refund you 75% of your investment. But if you hold on to it until next year and you still want a refund, then you get 110% back. So it's not exactly over, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be launching anytime soon. And there's been rumors that they might just even launch the blockchain without the token, which obviously
Kind of sounds like at that point they're admitting that they sold the security because they're guaranteeing financial return for investors or people holding that token.
I'm not sure if that counts. I think
I mean, wouldn't you essentially call that like a bond, Brian? Right? Like, I gave your company a bunch of capital, and you're telling me, just wait a year, and I'll give you 110% of that capital. That kind of just sounds like they turned it into a debt bond.
Yeah, I think it's basically a bond. Except it depends on like how it's tied to the value, or like how they can keep their promise.
So hold on though. Now, when I say 110%, right? Like, what was used to like pay for the Telegram like ICO? How did they collect funds? Was this done on Ethereum? Was it like?
I think it was. It had to be, right?
So when they say 110%, are they talking about paying everyone back in US dollars? Or do they mean 110% of like the token or like the ETH that was used? Like, what does that 110% mean?
I have no idea. Wait, actually, I think that they might have raised private money. I don't know. I'm definitely speaking out of my ass at this point.
Yeah, so I think there's like a lot of complications that could like happen there. Like, the most obvious one is if they're promising back 110% in a speculative asset like ETH or BTC or whatever, what if in the span of a year the price of BTC or ETH is 10x from what it is now? Where are they affording to get this 10% from? On the other hand, if it's in US dollars, you can arguably see that as very favorable. If we look at the whole Mt. Gox settlement, Mt. Gox eventually kind of got off because there actually was a point in time where Mt. Gox, despite not having all of the BTC due to the Mt. Gox hack, they actually eventually did have enough due to the BTC appreciation in dollar amount to pay everyone back. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Again, not sure on the details, but it does look like it was probably denominated in US dollar because they did have a KYC system, so I'm assuming it's dollar denominated. That's the assumption. But yeah, again, this Telegram's ICO is one of the biggest one behind EOS, $1.7 billion. That was the amount they raised. So interesting to see how that played out. On to other headlines. Actually, we're going back to EOS now. EOS is a compound protocol implemented on EOS, so it allows you to short EOS DApp. That's not their main selling point. That's not how what's his name? I spoke to him. That's not how the founder described his project, but it is one of those things that you could do that using the application. So again, Compound, if you don't know, is this very popular DeFi application that allows you to kind of build interest on your tokens. So you kind of deposit it, other people borrow it out, you earn interest, and then your interest goes back into the pool, so you could compound your investment. That's where the name comes from. It is that implementation of it on EOS. So again, I spoke to the founder. Super solid background. Apparently, he worked for NASA, graduated MIT. Did a ton of very interesting work at Microsoft for, I don't know, something 20 years, he said. So, very interesting guy. I think I might do a deeper dive later on, maybe have him come on the show and talk about it a little bit more. But super interesting project, I think. And the last bit of news is the Bose Core is participating in the block.one challenge to get Ethereum smart contracts running on EOS. So, block.one came out a month or two back. They say they're going to have this. They had this challenge, 200K, if you could get Ethereum smart contracts up and running on EOS. And the two specific thing they mentioned was the ERC20 token standard and the ERC721, which is the NFT standard. So it looks like block.one's going after that crowd of developers, hoping to bring those developers onto the EOS blockchain. So maybe they are doing something to boost the EOS ecosystem after all. So interesting to see how that plays out. And that's all the headlines.
Yeah, I think the EOS EVM project is something that's pretty interesting. I'm not sure how, it's an interesting project. I'm not sure how useful it'll be in terms of convincing projects to build on EOS as opposed to just building on ETH, if that's what they were doing already. To me, the big selling point of EOS is its economic model as opposed to how Ethereum functions. But I do think it will be useful as an option to developers, and I do think it's an actually good piece of capital that block.one has allocated. I do think it's a good use of funds. The only thing that I'm unsure of there is this is my first time hearing about Boss working on the challenge. I do remember that Saeed from EOS Cafe was also working on it, and I'm unsure because I haven't been following it too closely. I'm unsure what his implementation was lacking, or if there was anything that was lacking that didn't kind of meet the full criteria. So, I mean, I know I don't think you'd be able to answer that, but yeah, that's just something I would point out. As far as I'm aware, Saeed was kind of first to the punch, but I don't know if maybe he got feedback back from them and they were like, nope, you didn't do everything we asked you to. And so it's still up in the air. But I think it's great to see multiple teams, multiple individuals, working on completing this challenge. And I do think, like I said, it's a useful piece of public infrastructure. So I'm glad to see block.one, funding that.
Yeah, well, again, I can't offer technical commentary on that, but it is interesting that after Saeed submitted his solution, kind of just willy-nilly on YouTube, because there wasn't a portal for him to submit actually, a block.one created a website dedicated to the challenge, and then he was able to submit it. So I don't know, but yeah, I think it's cool. I just wonder how attractive this would be, because again, Ethereum has gas fees, so I'm not sure if, I don't know, it just gives me
one of the things about the EOS.io EVM, as far as I'm aware, is it doesn't bill gas, as in it doesn't actually charge the gas in the EVM or in the EOS EVM.
Yeah, so they would kind of have to replicate that as well, right? Because I'm assuming the smart contract takes into account that.
Yeah, I believe, so there's a section here in the Boss Court article which says gas fee is calculated but not billed. When instructions return a block gas limit, the supply is a sufficiently large supply and the transaction gas is enforced. So it seems like there's obviously a limit as opposed to how much gas a transaction can consume and how much gas can be consumed in an EOS EVM block.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like that's mostly there as a limitation for it's not abused.
I see. I see. Well, I think that's everything. Did you guys have anything else that you want to bring up in the news that I didn't cover?
No, I think it was a great list of content.
Thanks. It was great having you on. You're always on, but you just don't speak all the time. And again,
Thanks for the update, Asphyxia.
No
Yeah,
problem.
I'm sure the
It's
community appreciates it.
my first time, joining the podcast from a speaking point of view in a while.
yeah. Okay, so let's wrap it up. So I want to thank everyone who listened to the very end for listening in on this beautiful Sunday night. Happy Mother's Day, in case you haven't told your mother that. And we'll chat to you guys next week with another update.
Thanks, take care.
Yep, thanks everybody.
Okay, ciao. Okay.